First off, let's talk about your love of cartoons, creating cartoons. What is the genesis of that? Where did this love spark from?
Well, I think I can't even remember that far back, but my father loved newspapers. He was a lawyer and a judge in North Carolina, and he took he took the Raleigh News and Observer, the Richmond News Leader, the Richmond Times Dispatch, and the Norfolk Ledger. All four newspapers every day, and they all had great comic sections, which I immediately would go to that comic section. And whenever I'd pick up a pencil, I'd copy a Crazy Cat. Well, I remember the one because it was his drawings were kind of like Peanuts. They were kind of simple, but they hit it right on the nail's head. So
So you were self-taught, or did you take classes? No.
obviously, never took an art class. So
But practice makes perfect?
yeah, well, we were saying that UT was going to show a lot of my old drawings, which I can't cringe when I think about it. Because with me, each year I would get better and better and better and better. In my own mind.
Well, I think those of us who have seen
Yeah.
your many know
But
you hit the mark.
the drawing and idea thing, that's a God thing, and he kept opening doors for me that I would pass by, and finally, well, I was in the Marines, and I got as your husband, and when I got out, Patsy and I got married, and I'd gone to UNC a year to play football before I went in the Marines, and then so Patsy and I went back to UNC, and I enrolled in the business school because an uncle told me that's how you get ahead. But we moved into the Victory Village where veterans live, and we moved next door to Jim Kiley, who was working his way through med school. And one of his jobs was delivering the Daily Tar Heel. And he saw all these drawings and doodles I was doing on my bookkeeping ledger books. And he said, if I took you down to the Daily Tar Heel, would you draw cartoons for 'em? And I said, ah. So we went down, and Ed Yoder and Louis Carrara. Ed Yoder ended up winning a Pulitzer, but they were the editors, and they said, if you draw political cartoons, we'll run them. So
There you have it.
had I not moved in next door to Jim Kiley, who knows?
You know, life is all about those opportunities
Oh yeah,
that present
yeah.
themselves.
So the first time I saw one of my cartoons published, I dropped out of business school, much to the delight of the accounting professor, and enrolled in political science, thinking, if I was going to draw about politics, maybe I ought to know something.
So political science was the realm. That was the moving next door to this gentleman, and then the political science realm. I mean, it really were the tools in your toolbox then. You're equipped. So your time at Chapel Hill.
So for 3 years, I studied political science and drew for the Daily Tar Heel.
Yeah. Well, a newspaper near and dear to my heart. Clearly,
Oh, yeah.
clearly it is. Then after your time at Chapel Hill, where did your journey take you then?
Well, when my senior year, I was also working for the Chapel Hill News Leader. Don't know who that is. Yeah. Well, oh yeah, I was working also for the Chapel Hill News Leader, and Roland Geddes was my editor, and he and I made up this sheet of cartoons that we mailed out to newspapers, offering my services as an editorial cartoonist. And I sent out 40 letters and got 39 no thank yous, and one we wish we could from Roanoke, Virginia, and then one maybe from the Knoxville Journal. And I immediately found copies of the Knoxville Journal and found out they were somewhat Republican. Growing up in eastern North Carolina in the 30s and 40s, there were no Republicans. That was the old solid South. And so I found a friend from western North Carolina who I was in an English class with. And I talked him into driving with me to Knoxville for my interview, and I quizzed him on what I should say to impress Guy L. Smith, the editor of the Knoxville Journal. And by the time we got, that was on old 70. You know, there was no interstate. And
Winding through the mountains
then. It took us 12 hours to get here. And for 12 hours, you know, I quizzed him. And when I got here, I was a Republican. And so, and Mr. Smith agreed. So they hired me. And this was 8 months after I graduated.
8 months.
I went, and Patsy, at the time we moved to Knoxville, she was 9 months pregnant. So we cut it pretty close.
You did. You got a new
Yeah.
job, you have a new family, and here you are. You know,
And the trick with Guy Smith said, well, we can't hire a full-time cartoonist, but if you would be a newspaper man twice a week and then draw cartoons 5 days a week, we'll hire you.
so you wrote then some for the paper.
One story.
That's all it took. You're a
Yeah.
newspaper man. One story. That's all it took.
Well, that's the old Harry Hirschfield joke. He asked his editor if a cartoonist was a newspaper man. And the editor says, is the barnacle a ship? So,
Hey, all that matters is you landed where you were meant to be.
So I did one story about a little guy that ran into a car with his bike. The car wasn't even moving, but he ran into the car with his bicycle, and they took him to the emergency room, and they told me to write a graph about it, and so.
So one and done as far as the stories. One and done.
Never asked again. I proved I was a barnacle. So.
But you proved you're an incredible person who creates
I was in the office.
amazing
I was
cartoons.
in the office with Guy Smith one time, and he was saying, Daniel is the most creative person I've ever known when it comes to spelling. So the cartoonist motto is one picture is worth 1,000 misspelled words.
There you go.
So,
Well, let's talk about the many, many, many creations that you've made over the years, and then we'll go back to your transition to the Sentinel. But can you count? Do you know how many cartoons you've created in your lifetime?
well, it's over 20,000, so actually published.
Yeah.
Because for everyone that's published, they will probably, you go through, you doodle out ideas, and you throw away half of them. And then back second week with Guy Smith, I would come in, draw the cartoon, show it to him, go home. And then on about the sixth day, I showed him one. He said, I can't run that. And it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so they used some syndicate thing. So the next day, I did 4 of us and took them in. And I got in the habit of doing 4 ideas.
That
And
they
then,
could pick and choose
yeah,
from.
so they went,
Yeah.
so they won't be saying, we can't run that.
Of the thousands and thousands and thousands, is there one or that stands out?
No,
No.
no. The last one I did. Yeah. Because immediately you turn one in and then you start worrying about the next day. Because you got to do it again. I didn't realize how much pressure it was until 2019 when I didn't have to get up and go to work and there was no pressure. You know, I said, what's that? You know, nothing.
But you still create. You
Well,
still.
that's part of
Yeah.
creation is,
Yeah.
looking at the blank sheet of paper and saying,
How often do you create now? Now that you're retired and you don't have to meet that deadline of getting them in, is it a daily thing or is it a just whenever you feel like
I've
it?
got a doodle book over there behind Jerry that I'll sit in that chair and you just doodle all the time. Every now and then, ideas. The worst question you could ask is, where do you get your ideas? Because I have no idea. You know, it's just the way you think.
So, but if there is, say, something when going back to when you were with the Journal, the Sentinel, clearly you were creating based on lots of times what was happening in the political sphere, in the cultural sphere. That process, was it just as you said, like an idea? You knew what you wanted to write and to draw about.
Well, yeah, you have to keep up with what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot of reading and a lot of, I talked with reporters at the paper that were covering city and county stuff, you know, to know what the heck was going on. And then you get an opinion about it. You say, boy, that's not too bright. Cartooning is really a negative form of art, you know. You rarely say anything nice about somebody.
So what was the response from people whenever you would make a cartoon that may be specific to a person? Did you get some
the really
interesting
good
letters?
politicians would say, no matter what you said to them about them, they loved it, and they would ask for the original. So
It's truly, I mean,
yeah.
hey, if they're not talking, then what matters?
Oh,
you
yeah.
you had
That's
people
what-
talking about them, right?
yeah, so that's what Kaz always said. You know.
Yeah, who are some of the more interesting people you would?
Well, right off the bat was Kaz Walker.
Yeah.
You know, because when I first got started drawing for the Journal, I was saying, what the heck am I going to be drawing about? And then I turned on the TV, and that was Kaz. And I said, thank you.
It's a gold mine.
Oh, yeah, it really was. And so the first time that they voted on metropolitan government, both papers were for it, and Kaz Walker was against it. He was against everything, you know. I always most people look on Kaz as getting Dolly started, and the music end of him, which was great. But I always looked at him through politics, which I thought he was a millstone around Knoxville's neck. So I drew many not too flattering Kaz cartoons. So anyhow, the city and county were voting on metro government, and the papers were for it, and Kaz was against it. And he would be on his TV show saying how awful, he called it, Mussolini government was going to be. So I did this cartoon of Kaz. You know, he had on his TV show, he pushed his grocery store. So I had Kaz holding up this slab of bologna, this big loaf of bologna, labeled anti-metro bologna. And he was saying, "Say neighbors, I'm running a special on bologna this week." So we ran that in the paper. And Metro government is soundly defeated. And the next week, in the middle of his grocery store ads, he runs my cartoon. And he runs a special on bologna. And that's when we started copywriting all the cartoons.
Absolutely. Well, let's pick up. So you spent years at the Journal, and then
30
years at the
till
Journal.
they died.
And then you found another home quickly.
Sam Venable was my go-between.
Yeah.
And so he and I, because Harry Moskowitz couldn't talk to me, but Sam could, and he said, not if the Journal died, but when the Journal died, because it was obviously going to happen.
Yeah. And
So-
then you found your new home at the Sentinel.
It was already in.
Yeah.
The day they announced it, I walked downstairs to Harry's office, and
It was
here I am.
not much of a transition at all. You just
No.
did it. And
Because
you-
we were in the same building.
Right.
We were upstairs.
They
They
were.
were downstairs.
and how many years exactly were you at the Sentinel?
30 in each
60 years
60 years.
total.
And the reason I retired was the head guy who was in Nashville came and said, "We're cutting the editorial page down to 3 days a week." And no editorial page, no editorial cartoonist, so. And then they offered me a sweetheart buyout deal, so I took it.
So you were able to see your industry transform over those 60 years.
Yeah, from the peak
To-
to slowly.
But cartooning still has a place. And I have to assume you think it's a very important place in our realm.
Oh, haven't you? Yeah, and they're taking advantage of the internet. You can go online, and I don't know how many actual cartoonists, editorial cartoonists, are working for newspapers now. When I was doing it, it was a couple of hundred, and it's down to teens now. Who are actually working for a newspaper.
Right. And creating.
But there are so many of them. You can go online and pull up oodles of because there's so much to say.
So much to say.
Yeah.
It's so now more than ever, I think. What would your advice be to a young person who would love to follow in Charlie Daniels' footsteps?
Oh, I wouldn't know what to tell them now. I would go to med school or something. You know, if you got good hands, become a dentist. Because that's why most dentists are great artists, because they have the steady, good hands. But we talk about that. We'll talk about that this weekend when the National Cartoonists Society comes here.
Yeah, and I would like to talk.
What do you advise them then?
Yeah, I mean, because I think we're all at every stage in life looking to those people who paved the way.
Yeah.
You know, wisdom is valuable, and you have a lot of that wisdom. Is there anything that I have not asked you that you would like to share?
No, I've been counting on you.
I always wanted to let you have the final word, and I may come up with some other questions, but Charlie, thank you. As always, you're
Go
a
Tar
gem.
Heels.
Go Heels, and do better than you did last
Oh.
year. For the record, please state your name and what you do.
My name is Brad Boring. I work at Mortgage Investors Group as a loan officer.
All right.
But he's a cartoonist.
but I'm a cartoonist.
Yes, and that's why we want to just hear all about the big event coming up this weekend that is really going to showcase the best of the best. Tell us about that.
It's the Southeast chapter of the National Cartoonists Society. And every year we have an annual meeting where we get together. And this year it's Knoxville. And in November, we're trying to find a place. And Charlie here goes, what about the Dogwood Arts Festival? So Charlie and I came downtown and met with them. And it just bloomed from there. So what we're all doing is, it starts Friday at Children's Hospital. There's 11 of us going to Children's Hospital to draw cartoons for the children there. Then we get up Saturday morning, have our meeting till about noon. Then we go to the World's Fair site where they're going to have tables set up in the, the Maker Experience
Yep.
area. And we're going to be set up there at 3 o'clock that afternoon. We're going to have question and answers where some of the major cartoonists will get up and answer questions. We always draw a huge younger crowd. Like you said, people wanting to be a cartoonist. And we just like to answer their questions. So that's pretty much.
And that has to be so encouraging for both of you, that young people do want to learn this art and this, and so that has to be encouraging, that this isn't going away.
Right.
This is something that is, and why is it? Explain to me, why should people appreciate editorial cartoonism and cartooning? We know why we do, but why should the viewer?
Well, it's a way we express. You know, when you were asking Charlie regarding, I drew for 20 years for the Knoxville News Sentinel, and got a letter from somebody, and they actually published the letter in the newspaper. And when I read it that Sunday, I'm going, oh, Harry Mosca's going to fire me. And I met with him the next Monday, and he looks at me and he goes, you know, I said, am I in trouble? And he said, Brad, here's the deal. You make one man mad, you've made 20 others laugh. He says, absolutely not. That's why we published it, you know. But it's the quest of taking a blank sheet of paper and making a cartoon about it, out of it.
And it's the goal to make people think. Do you want to spark something to maybe make someone think a little deeper?
Yeah, hopefully, you know, that we aren't in it just for laughs. That it's a deeper thing.
Yeah, but it's kind of like Children's Hospital. All we're trying to do is make them smile. You know, that's what we're looking to do when we go up there.
Yeah, this weekend is all about smiles.
Yeah, and normally when we do this, it's usually only me and Charlie and a couple other cartoonists. But this year, we've had 11 come forward going, we want to do this.
How has the industry changed? From your perspective, Charlie shared from his, how do you see it has changed, and where do you see it going? Cartooning.
Cartooning, what would you say? It's a lost art?
No, it's a lot of kids out there. Well, you know,
Publishing wise, it's, you know.
Well, the newspaper end of it, I don't. But the internet is great possibilities.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's just a new avenue
Yeah.
for getting it out there.
And then, and this Saturday, there's going to be a lot of cartoonists there that specialize in that. You know, getting it on the internet and things like that. I tried for years to get syndicated, and never. I have probably 500 rejection letters at home, and never actually got syndicated. But I was happy with just drawing for the News Sentinel. you know.
It becomes a personal thing. I have to think that okay, this is well, yeah, that would be great. This is for me, and this is what I'm doing, and this is what I'm contributing to
And
my
I get
community.
phone calls from people.
Yeah.
Wow, that was funny. You know, how in the world did you come up with? I did a cartoon one time, two guys on a golf course, and it's pouring down rain, and from the sky is this big 4. And the guy looks at the other guy and goes, I bet we're getting ready to see some golf ball size hell.
I mean, how do
You know,
you come up with your ideas? You know,
You don't ask.
yeah,
Yeah.
you just,
No.
it just comes.
It's the old light bulb thing, you know.
Boom.
Yeah.
Well,
J. Ding Darling, who was a famous cartoonist in the 30s and 40s, you know, he had this great definition that the editorial cartoon is a humor-coated capsule by means of which the sound, sober judgment of editorial minds are surreptitiously gotten down the throats of an apathetic public. I love that definition.
Yes. Wow.
Pretty
That's
cool.
it is.
Yeah.
That makes a statement
Yeah.
right there for sure. Well, obviously, it has been cartooning, has been just a big part of both of your lives. What has it, with this being the last question, what has it brought you?
Happiness.
yeah, joy, happiness.
I never, in 60 years, I never dreaded getting up in the morning and going down and looking at that blank sheet of paper. It was always a thrill and always came on and said thank you.
And he still does it.
Yeah.
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 You
Yeah.
know, still, he's got his old drawing board
Yeah.
from the New Sentinel back here.
Yeah.
He moved in.
Yeah, he and I moved it out. I
Yeah.
helped him move out.
And all those pins, all those pins, and all the cartoons that they've created. Well, thank you, both of you. Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
You're the best.
Well, no,
No.
you're the best. You're the best.
And remember on Saturday evening at the UT library,
okay.
they're
Okay.
gonna have his cartoons displayed.
Let's shine the light a little bit more on this one because we can never shine enough light on him. But I mean, 20,000, 20,000 plus cartoons, so much to share that people need to embrace
And
and
the
take
old
in.
ones, the ones that you don't want to see.
Ooh, those
I made sure they were going to dig some of those out when I met with them.
How about you? When you look back at some of your first, do you
Oh
cringe?
Lord, yeah, awful.
Yeah.
You know, I'd say one of the most favorite ones that I've ever done was Charlie and I would draw for the Peyton Manning golf tournament. That was one of the times we'd go to Children's Hospital. And Charlie comes to me and he goes, tell you what, let's do a Rosie's Diner together. And I'll draw half of it, and Charlie draws half of it. And he gave the original to me after we got done and it was published and everything. So I've got it at home, and we're going to have it on display.
Okay.
And I think you told me I'm the only person you've ever done a cartoon with.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. A collab.
Yeah.
That
Oh, yeah.
that is going to.
Well, we sat down and and he corrected me on a couple of things. No, Brad, you make the bubble like this. I said okay, and I've got all the originals and everything. But I would say that was one of the best cartoons that I'd done with him.
Yeah.
That we did together, and I got a lot of phone calls from it.
Oh, I'm sure.
You know.
I am sure. They're all keepers, but that one right there, that one is the keeper for sure. Wow.
Now, on Charlie's behalf, you look at Kaz Walker and you look at people like that, but Trump filled his head full of ideas. He would look at me and go, wow.
I was going to say, this day and time, would you have a lot of material to go with?
The sad thing about this time used to be you draw a cartoon and hopefully influence somebody. But everybody's,
Polarized.
I'm here and set in cement, and I'm here set in cement, and you're not going to influence me
Yeah.
or even make me laugh.
And that's dangerous? Is it sad? What is that?
Sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you got to have laughter.
Life
And we're
needs
laughing.
laughter.
Because people are so offended by, rather than seeing the humor in it.
Yeah.
That humor-coated capsule,
Yeah.
they spit it out.
Yeah. We need laughter.
Oh, heavens, yes.
Yeah. That's essential to life.